conversations. Let's have real conversations.
Get ready to stir it up.
Life events and everything in between. Let's go.
Get ready to stir it up.
No capping. If guests got you covered right up.
Get ready to stir it up. Stir it up.
Come on.
Get ready to stir it up.
Hi everyone, welcome to Stir It Up. I have Seth Asafo here with me today.
Again.
Thank you. Like someone I know who's bringing her managers to speak to me about the frequency with which she's on the show. Please, are you bringing your managers as well?
Oh, I am my own manager.
There's a person I know who has managers who she's bringing, you know, to have a very strong word with me.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'll find mine.
You find yours.
Yes.
I think it's very good advice, actually. Seth and I are going to talk about sex today. And once again, to set it up, when I think about sex within our cultural context, it's a bit of a mixed bag. It's a mixed bag because there are those with the heavy moral leanings or religious leanings who see sex as something to be avoided, something that happens during marriage, and it's only for procreation. If you're a young teenager and your mother will say to you, listen, if you have sex, if a man looks at you or touches your elbow, you'll get pregnant. And so some of these things are even carried into the future as adults. And then on the other hand, we have this very rich culture where across Ghana and even the continent, there are all these cultural practices that, you know, prepare rites of passage, that prepare, you know, both young girls and young boys for, you know, adulthood. And part of those cultural, you know, inductions include education on sex.
Absolutely.
Right? So in some quarters it's taboo, and in some quarters it's, you know, something to be celebrated. So, thoughts? Where do you want to start from?
I'll start from Ghana.
Accra.
So, I mean, I think that by and large, as the years have gone by, we've had a lot more openness to discuss issues like this. And I want to commend you for even having this particular, you know, episode on that discussion, because it's very vital. The ideology surrounding the sexual activity and its experience has many different connotations among many different people, and I think you highlighted a number of them. But regardless of it, it's very important for us to talk about. It's important to situate it within the context of both society, biology, and even between how different cultures, you know, perceive it. Now, there's a subjectivity when it comes to the experience of sex. And these, I think, are also localized to the location in which the discussions are had.
Got it.
Regardless of that, the conversation is still necessary.
So do you see it still as being a taboo subject, or not as much?
Well, since the introduction of the internet or technology, I always say that it no longer is a taboo topic. Now, for me specifically, if you don't do it, somebody will do it for you. Yes. And maybe we can say that with the adult generation, they have their own ingrained, you know, statutes on sex experience and all of that. But among the younger generation, they have a lot more information on sex, which of course is not context specific. It's based on things they've heard people say and things they've seen, absent the, I don't want to say the good practices, but in a sense, they fall within the range of information that should be contextualized so that people don't have unnecessary expectations or even ideologies about what it is. So the exposure is already there. Yeah. People are learning. And if we don't have people to talk about it, for them to understand or situate it within a certain scope of reference,
Yes.
then it's all over the place.
Yes. So it's almost like when you have teenage children, they will have information overload, both directly from the internet, from their friends, from, all over the place. And so you need to contextualize it for them.
Yes. Because the experience that's portrayed out there is scripted.
Yeah.
So the kind of ways that people understand this, like maybe if they watch a sexual theme movie or pornography, it gives a certain expectation or overview of sex that's scripted. It's
not real.
It's not real.
Yes.
And if their expectation of sex is that way, then they're going to have ramifications along the line. Because the expectations might never be met.
Absolutely.
Which then leads to a stifling. And then the whole experience of it in itself might be lost.
And it's also, there's a bit of disappointment that comes into play. It's like, or they begin to kind of think, is there something wrong with me?
Yes. Or they may also overindulge.
Absolutely. Okay. So, going to basics. How important do you think sex is for Homo sapien?
I like the way you say Homo sapien. You just give me you give me permission to go into the biology and the evolution, where the Homo sapien word comes from. So, I mean, if you look at, when we talk about survival drives, okay, the drive for hunger, the drive for thirst, they have a survival need. They give humans, or the Homo sapien, a survival advantage. In as much as sex is considered a drive, it does not particularly give us a direct survival advantage, apart from the fact that it protects the human species from extinction. But if you don't use it, you won't die, as compared to water and food, that if you don't use based on a number of days, you are most certainly going to lose your life. So that would be the premise to start from. However, it has become a very relevant, or it is a very relevant experience, especially when it comes to the social context of human existence, which is that human beings we're hardwired to connect. And sex is a way of connection between people. Now, I don't even know if I'm right to say, and let me just leave it as a connection between people. Exactly.
So it's important.
Very important.
Okay. Now, if you take that level of importance when it comes to connection, do you want to tell us a bit more about the connection itself? Is it emotional? Is it physical? Is it a combination of the two? And what does it mean to the different sexes within that relationship?
Okay. So you see, we have thematic benefits of sex, physical, psychological, and then social, or let me say socio-cultural. So in terms of physical, it is a form of exercise. It does a lot
for calories.
Yes, it does. I mean, one act of sex per the research will burn about 200 calories. Not so much, but it's not
enough.
bad. Yeah. Well, it doesn't also mean you should overload yourself and overindulge, because that in itself can also become problematic. It wears out the system. So you have its benefits for the heart, because
cardiovascular health.
It's light aerobic exercise. It's great for the heart. It's also good for your immune system. So it has these.
Tell me how it's great for your immune system.
Well,
I've read that, but I'm just being.
See, by and large, during sex, the bonding that normally occurs helps with the release of a feel-good chemical that we call oxytocin. And oxytocin, sometimes they call the hug-along hormone. Now, oxytocin directly affects your immune system. So it boosts your immune system to become stronger, just like hugging people. So oxytocin is the reason why when you fall in love, it's so deep. It's the reason why when people fall in love in the initial stages, they never notice any flaws about their partners.
Because overload.
Because you have so much oxytocin, everything seems pleasant. And when oxytocin starts to wear out, then you start to notice some of the flaws. He's too, or she's too, that kind of thing. And oxytocin directly boosts your immune system. It's like fuel for the immune system. Okay, so you have that. Now, if you look at sex from a psychological level, okay, it allows people to feel that I am important. One, because they're able to initiate and complete the act, and two, because somebody allows them to do that with them. Because, you know, you share it together. So then people now talk about, what about masturbation? Well, the research on masturbation is here and there. It has some benefits, but when it comes to social connection, it's lacking significantly. And so it's better that it's between two people. So you look at it from that psychological perspective, and then you also look at it from the point of allowing people to be vulnerable. Now, sex is one of the most vulnerable periods in everybody's life, because you're allowing someone to see you in your bare state, in your nakedness, as it were, okay? So to allow someone means that you're making yourself vulnerable. And that's generally good for becoming self-aware. Okay, so there's a lot of, there's some interesting things about, in the act of sex, whilst men think about their performance or how well they are doing, women are thinking about the appearance.
Okay.
How am I looking during that period?
Okay. And does it matter to a man how you're looking during sex?
Actually, it depends on who.
Okay.
Because some people are visual.
Okay.
So there are things they'd like to see that, of course, stirs them up even more.
Oh.
And some people will also tell you that when I'm doing it in a certain way, I get more intense feelings as compared to another. So I think looks definitely have it. But in this context, what I actually mean is their awareness is all on like,
self.
How am I looking? Am I looking a little fat? What does he think of me? That's the way that what's running through his mind. And that can usually be an anticlimax. Yeah. Whilst men are also thinking of their, am I putting out enough? Am I thrusting enough? Am I strong enough? Kind of ideology. And those things can be beneficial at the same time, problematic also.
How so?
So beneficial in the sense that if a man is thinking about their performance, it means that they're also thinking about pleasuring their partner, or being able to ensure that their partner is within the act as much as they are. But on the other hand, it can cause an anxiety for a person who believes that I don't think I'm doing it right. I think something is off. It just takes away, because sex is a very mental thing. Beyond the physical, there's a mental aspect to sex, which is that the mind must be in tune with what you're doing in order for you to get its full benefits or enjoyment. So sometimes when I hear people say sex is overrated, all I tell them is, you haven't had the right one. Yeah. Not the right person, you haven't had the right one. And that's why you think it's so. Now, imagine someone in the act of sex also thinking of, is my tummy looking a little too big? They become self-conscious. And that also can be an anticlimax in women. It's been shown that they'll start to maybe even lose lubrication, and then it just makes the whole process a bit cumbersome. And of course, at the apex of the sexual experience is usually the ejaculation or the orgasm. And that might normally stifle the ability for people to reach that level.
Got it. So we know that it's important. When you come into relationships, when should we start having the conversations about sex? And I know this is a proper stereotype conversation, because dependent on your religious leanings and all of that, if you're an elder in the church, you could be losing your eldership.
When you talk about the talk about sex, is it the doing or is it just the talk?
However you want to answer it. I'll give you carte blanche to determine how you want to respond to this.
For me, in the process of getting to know anybody, I think you have to know them in totality. So about their preferences, whether they've already been engaged, they're active, they're not. It's a conversation you must have. Now, in one of our other conversations, we talked about the issue of choice.
Yeah.
And by discussing these things, you throw out or give them the choice to make a commitment or to make a choice to say, okay, this is something I want to do or something that I don't want to do. The question around when should it be done is always tricky, and it's also a slippery slope. People say, when the time is right, you'll know.
But that's a bit of a response, right?
Not at all.
Okay, explain.
Not at all. Because, you see, the same way you can
see the way I'm
say...
looking into Jerusalem's gates?
Let me give you this context. So, people have many rules, like after the third date, or 90 days, or whatsoever. Now, a very callous young man...
Has patience.
I'll have patience.
For the
It's
3
just
months.
90 days. That's what it becomes. Like,
Yeah.
it's just 90 days. And I will wait to do that. And the other day I was interacting with somebody, and the person said, the time is right when you are ready to deal with whatever consequence comes afterwards.
I think I can accept that, right? The reason why I am uncomfortable with you will both know when the time is right is, as human beings, we are a bundle of hormones, and and when you meet someone in that initial stage and there's huge attraction and all of that, it's very likely that in the first couple of weeks or whatever, there's that huge attraction. Now, does that mean the time is right?
Not at all.
Not at all. Exactly, right? So often, if you're going, is the time is right based on how you're feeling? Is the time is right based on how you're getting to know someone? Is the time is right based on, having built trust? And so I kind of feel like when you give that, general statement of you will know, it allows you to fill that response with all sorts of things that are your own justification.
Which essentially is what it is.
Okay.
Because there's no one standard for judging when the time is right. For one person, the time might be right because the duration is right. For another person, it might be because of a gesture of kindness that they've never experienced. And they say, you know what, this is somebody I'm willing to offer myself to.
Okay.
For somebody, it might just be, I just want to do it, so I do it.
Right.
And we don't have, and you mentioned
So
trust.
why don't we say that if you want to do it, right? But when you, and listen, I might be off here, but I feel like it's one of those really nice to say things that really don't mean anything.
Which is, if you want to do it, do it.
No, when the time is right, you'll know.
No, when the time is right,
You'll know.
You will. I think, let me put it this way. You'll give yourself permission to allow that to happen. See, just like how people have rules.
Yeah.
Like, I'll never do it until I'm married.
Okay.
And the time will be right 1 million times. But the rule will supersede.
But in that, then the time is only right when you are married.
Absolutely. That is their criteria.
So I guess the point I'm making is it's subjective for everybody.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move on.
Yeah, it's very subjective.
It's very subjective for everybody. And so let's allow people to make the choice based on their subjectivity.
Coming back to that is, the submission I made earlier about someone who said, the time is right if you're ready to deal with whatever consequence comes after that.
If I get pregnant, if I get an STD, if the person decides that they are going to stalk me forever, whatever it is.
If they decide afterwards they will leave.
If they decide that they're done.
Exactly. Like, then once you're ready to process it, it doesn't take much away from you.
Understood. Yeah. Okay. So we've determined that the time is right. If you look at men and women, I mean, you've already started talking about how men see sex and how women see sex a bit during the act. I want to talk a bit about what sex means to a man. How important is it? And then we'll talk about it from a female perspective as well.
So let me say that broadly, sex is there are many similarities of like what sex is to both men and women.
Okay.
So one of the general terms is that it's a way of connecting.
Okay.
Now this is where we talk about intimacy,
Yeah.
and some catchy expressions of intimacy is intimacy, like getting into a deeper connection with somebody is usually intimacy, and that's different from the sex itself.
Correct.
Now, intimacy allows people to be not just sexual but vulnerable with each other, so that you see, if you look at our context where it's almost like socially women don't or should not express their sexual needs or talk a lot about sex. Like the moment you start to talk about how you want it or how you experience it, then society looks at you as
You're a bad girl.
not, sometimes they say not motherly enough.
Okay.
Because a mother should not be,
Have
and
those
these
desires.
are just like faulty societal perceptions, as it were. Okay, now that connection, because you're opening up to each other, allows you to bond on a deeper level. And there's this experience that a lot of I'll say men, because they have normally described this to me in therapy. So when men are in committed relationships with a partner, after some time they start to notice that their performance has dipped, and they tend to explain it in terms of their prowess is also dipping. But that's what intimacy does. So now the attachment that you have with the person is so deep that the excitement you get in the act is usually also more intense.
Okay.
So they tend to have more ejaculations a little quicker. And then they say, no, I think I'm losing because I used to put out X and a lot of them will actually go and, like scientists, go and test if the theory is true. And then they realize, okay, well, outside I'm doing maybe 10 minutes, but here I'm doing 2. But that's what intimacy does. It brings such a deeper connection that the feelings, there are so many intense feelings that you have that makes the process of sex even more fulfilling or more enjoyable.
So why do a lot of men say that sex with one person gets monotonous and boring after a while?
That issue.
Like, I'm worrying you, eh?
Let's put it this way. There have been, from a purely biological standpoint, okay, there have been a lot of studies that have shown that when you're engaged with one person for a while, and of course, like with men, what happens is men have sex and then build intimacy. Women develop intimacy
and then have sex.
and then they have sex, okay? So with many men, I'd say when the intimacy hasn't been built, then the sex is an act. It's just an act, which makes it easier for them to do that. Now, a lot of research points out to the fact that men are somehow hardwired to feel more attraction to new stimuli. And I suppose it's not just men, it's human nature really, that variety is something that's important to us. But within a context where the norms of society are necessary for existence, our ability to also exert self-control is important because it helps to build within you a sense of, I am able to accomplish.
Good.
Now, for example, they say when you engage in an act of sex, it helps you to build self-esteem. One, because you've been able to achieve. 2, because you've been able to pleasure another person. And 3, because you've been able to accomplish a task. Control is also part of building.
Okay.
And so it happens a lot. It's still not entirely understood the basis for why we want these. But some of these funny expressions of variety is the spice of life and things like that, they just come in. And I wish I had a better answer to this question. Honestly, I don't.
You actually don't have a better answer?
No, I don't.
There is something you don't have an answer to.
I don't.
Yeah. No, I hear you when you talk about when you have a relationship with someone for a long time, they get to know you and the intimacy is deeper. I can see how that works, especially when both of you are committed to the relationship. And that would be my logical sequencing of things, right? But you realize that we also have seen how many times where a man will say, you know, I want options or I want to explore, right? And it's very interesting just to see the divergence of views, or, you know, the conflicts that comes out of those two thoughts.
You know, sex therapists make a joke where they say, if you want to stop having sex, get married. And if you look at the whole sequence of sexual relationships within committed relationships,
Yeah.
in that particular sect, maybe I'm not going to say that it's monotonous, but I say that there are a lot of distractions that come people's ways, and so they gradually are desensitized to the act.
Yeah.
In fact, they start to prioritize
Other
things
things.
beyond that. Now, with humans, when you achieve some goals, then you feel like, okay, I'll be now there. So like many people say after election, no campaign, they get married, and like it's like that's what we were aiming for. Now, similarly, if you look at men, the actions towards sex are usually what many women would confuse, because then they're like so intense and every time around, and then once they get
What they want.
is the apex of what they want. So now there's after election, no campaign, only contract.
Contract renewals.
It's an interesting dynamic, but many people who are in committed relationships complain about the fact that they're not able to initiate and sustain as much. So averagely, for people who aren't, I use married because that's what the literature says, they tend to have sex about 3 or 4 times a week.
When they are, when they're not.
When they're not married.
Yes.
And when they get married, those who are doing very well will do about 52 a year, which is about 1
a week.
But
that's a lot. I mean, I think that you're looking at studies that are actually far better than the studies that I've looked at.
So I'm looking at this. These are the positive ones.
Yeah.
And then you have studies that show that people can go a year, and it's just once.
Yeah. I've seen studies where it's like once every 2 months.
Good.
If you're lucky, I'll give you some pity sex.
And they are usually little moderating variables like children.
Children are a big moderating variable.
The kind of work they do, whether there's physical illness, whether there's a smell, you know, and cleanliness and things like that. All those they're huge. See, because of the vulnerability that's associated with sex, if you're not careful, and then there's something extreme that happens, it can be ingrained in the person's mind for a very long time. And that makes them averse to the whole process.
So you just said something that allows me to ask a very segue question.
Okay.
I find that often men show up and they feel like, I'm here, I've rocked up, and so there should be sex, right? And meanwhile, there's not been any connection all day. There's not been anything that allows us to, you know, have that connection.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's been no priming. Right? You know, you need to prime your walls before you paint your walls. Right?
You see.
Now, after the honeymoon period, okay, after the campaign, and now you won the election, as you know, quite eloquently put it, or succinctly.
You must sustain it.
Right. What advice would you give to men if they want to be able to have a richer sexual experience within their relationships?
Well, it won't be just to men, it'll be to women as well.
No, I'll do women as well.
Okay.
But I want us to talk about men, and then we'll do women.
Okay, you see, if you look at the human sex response cycle,
yes.
Okay, you come to a place of desire, there's arousal, there's the act itself, the orgasm, and then you have the refractory period, or the period of quiescence or calm.
Yeah.
For men, it's like a sports car with a petrol engine. You step on the gas and boom, they're there. Like they get to that place very quickly. For women, on the other hand, it's like a diesel engine.
So what were the four stages?
The desire,
arousal.
or sometimes you say desire and excitement.
Okay.
Then you come to the act and the orgasm and then the place of calm.
Yeah.
Okay, now, men tend to get the desire and arousal very quickly as compared to women.
Okay.
So when you say that women have to be primed, it is very true. Now, if
Coral
you...
primer. Coral wall primer.
we had a sex class for some couples, and as part of the activities they had to do was send your partner a sexual message at work describing a part of their body you want to do something to, kind of. And we noticed that suddenly the need to engage had increased significantly. Why? Because the man will send a message like, I can't wait to rub my hands around the beads around your waist. And then once you do that, it sets the mind to start imagining what it would be like. Now that's one of the advantages of the human mind. It's a disadvantage, but also an advantage that whatever you think, your brain can bring it to life.
Yes.
So the moment she starts to envisage what their partner plans to do, they're already
having sex.
They're already,
Sparking.
they are flipping the sparks gradually. Yeah. Now, if you're doing this through the day, you're sending these messages. Before they come, the engine is already warm. So like a diesel engine, now it's able to perform. But just to show up and suddenly think that it must start is very difficult. Let's not forget, women need emotional connection. Most women, I want to be politically correct, need emotional connection in order to be able to do this.
Yeah.
So there was one time somebody put up a post and says, there's nothing they hate more than a jobless man who is horny. And
he ain't got nothing better to do.
Literally, I was like, but why would you say that? And then I started to,
think about
try to think about it. It's like, well, if you're able to provide my needs, you're sorting out my problems. It's all part of warming me up to feel that I should be vulnerable to you. And that's just an aside just to, for me to laugh. So you're warming the person up, but you're doing it by allowing them to visualize. You're turning them on in the moment. You're priming the engine for what should be done.
Yeah.
And that is the difference. The difference is between the response. So our response cycle for men is very quick, and for women it is slow. So they say the best sex is especially for women, is sex that has the foreplay extended. So that you prime or prepare before you go. As for us men, we can do anything at any time.
Understood.
Uh-huh.
Understood. I ask that because, and even the messages throughout the day don't need to be sexual.
They should be loving.
I think that once they connote some level of care or intimacy or I see you.
The vulnerability builds.
Right? It builds. So if it's even, thinking about you, or I'm saying like something that softens the person up a little bit. Well, it also depends on the person's personality as well, right? There's some women you send them that message and it goes right over their head. So point well taken without you saying anything. Right? But I think that you do need to have a bit of a connection throughout the day before you rock up. Okay. Women, if you were going to say something to women about improving sex with their partners, what would it be?
Men are very simple beings. The two most important things are what goes through the mouth and what goes through the other side.
Okay.
And essentially, all a man wants to feel is that you care.
Okay.
Sometimes we think so sophisticatedly about what to do for your partner and all of that. Most men don't care about that. They just want to feel like you acknowledge them as your protector. You acknowledge them as,
There's respect, and there is
disrespect, and it kills their drive. Because
I'm saying there is respect.
there's respect. That's
Yes,
it.
yeah.
They feel disrespected, and I say they feel because sometimes there's a distance between the intention and the impact. It's not always that an act was aimed at disrespecting, but it's just that that's how it comes off.
Yeah.
So men have very simple needs.
Okay.
They just want to feel that you care about them. They want to feel like you see them as powerful. And if you can do that, you're home free.
Interesting.
In many regards, a lot of men that go outside their families will tell you about it. I think we talked about this a while ago,
yeah.
which is that it's just a certain need for connection or someone who admires them. So, you know, in all these classic movies, when you watch about the woman that snatches the husband, they have these amazing rules of, oh, you had a bad day, come and let me rub your back. It's just acts of care.
Yeah.
And then suddenly they feel like, I'm more important here than I am there.
But we talked about the 80-20 within that construct.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In other words, if you show care,
Yeah.
you might be trying your best to reach 100-100. I don't know.
Now, often you find that women minimize their sexual needs. And I'm not sure why. Is it because they're appearing not to be overly eager? Is it because they're afraid of how they will be seen even within the confines of a relationship, right? But you might see a woman who's actually hugely sexual, right? But doesn't necessarily show that side of herself. Why would that be the case?
Society has an answer for that because, I mean, by and large, society has had a way of describing or regulating the expressions and experience of sexual activities within relationships and, you know, outside of it. So for the need to be seen within a certain light that's acceptable to society, people might minimize that.
Okay.
Now, the other part is also because they have been bent. And when I say bent, when somebody has shown themselves as they are, the kind of labels that people may pass out to them, maybe within their partners. I've had this experience where someone tries to talk about how they want to be touched, and then their partner says, who is teaching you this? You're doing with someone, that's why you are asking me to do it.
Yeah.
Or you watch too many movies, you know, and so because they get bent, they're like, okay, no need.
I'm not even going to share what I want.
Absolutely. And this works for both men and women, really.
Yeah.
That they get bent and they're like, why do I want to do this? Now, don't forget that it's already a difficult place to be. You build this intimacy with time. So the way that you start, over time, you get to know each other better. And when you are bent in that process, you seem to recall very quickly because you feel ashamed.
Yeah.
Not because you should be ashamed, but that's the way your mind tells you, like, I'm not wanted, or did I do something wrong? And there are a lot of, you know, connotations all around that already makes you feel that there's something off about it.
Yeah.
So I'd say, yes, it happens, but also happens in men also.
as well.
So there are men who I've interacted with who perhaps would say, I'm back, I want to have a good time with my partner, and then, you know, she'll say, I'm tired, number one.
I have a headache.
Another day, I'm tired. Third time, like, I can't do this anymore. Or attention starts to shift to the children. So the children are cared for, but he's not. So suddenly he's like, okay, well, I won't give you that chance for you to feel like you have one hanging over me. And I'm sure you've heard this before, like people withhold sex just to teach a lesson.
But how? How is that teaching someone you love a lesson?
Well, because you know the person wants it.
I struggle with that a little bit. And it actually dovetails nicely into the next question I had, where it's around how women see sex as transactional sometimes, right? And so you find that I've heard a lot of people say, or guys say that, you know, their partner will offer them sex when they want something from them, right? But maybe unpack it a bit for me. How is it, and I can see a man withholding sex. I can see a man withholding sex, right, as a way of showing power, or withholding intimacy, right, as a way of showing that they have more control, and I can see that happening with a woman. But what drives that?
It will be definitely a myriad of different reasons.
Okay.
And like you say, for manipulative purposes,
We are back to manipulation.
people will do that. You see, for example, if I do recognize that those moments that we share are great to you, as a way of basically communicating maybe some displeasure, I might
Withhold
decide,
it.
yeah, I'm not going to do it. Or I know that it's something that we do that helps to build something within us.
Yeah.
And because I'm not in that emotional space, or I'm upset with you because you did something, then I'm not going to do it. And some of these can be direct, and others can be very indirect. Like staying at work so late so that by the time you come, your partner is already
Asleep.
or consistently feigning illness, like finding a multiple of things to do just to ensure that that doesn't happen. Now, I worked with this couple who every time they planned, their work schedules were difficult, they had children, so they started to plan to initiate like intimacy or have sex. And every time they would plan, before the evening is over, the wife will pick a fight with the man.
Oh, how?
Exactly. She'll find something to say, and then, they're arguing, so then they don't have to do it.
Okay.
And that's an avoidance. Now, it could be as a result of maybe a sexual related disorder. It could be.
Yeah.
Or it could simply be that they don't have that connection, or there's something off about the interaction they're having.
it.
So there could be a myriad of reasons.
Okay. Subconscious or conscious for this woman, if you think about it?
Could be both. But in this particular case, this was somebody who felt very guilty every time they had intercourse.
Okay.
Why? Because growing up, there was this whole religious scope of reference. Like, it's
about sex.
About sex. And
Right.
so, partner is also extremely adventurous. He's been around. She hadn't.
Yeah.
And so, beyond a certain kind or form of doing
Doing
it,
this.
it seemed unnatural to her, and seemed so she used to go through a lot of guilt afterwards. So then she would avoid it,
Yeah.
because once you allowed yourself to do it,
Right.
you should allow yourself.
So, mindset shift for couples, right? Because there are all these stereotypes around sex for both men and women. If there is a one mindset shift you think women should have when it comes to sex, and one for guys, what would it be?
It's the same thing. Sex is an enjoyable experience. Anybody that says it's not, I keep saying they should give themselves time.
Okay.
It will work out. We work with dozens of people who were averse to sex in the beginning because, one, they had a challenge being vulnerable with their partners. The moment they did, and that also comes from people who say they have challenges with climaxing.
Okay.
That's experience. And this is largely female,
Yes.
having an orgasm. So then, but is that it?
Is that it? What's the point?
What's the point? And I say it's just a process. You're working the muscles, and I always look at sex as more psychological than the physical.
Yeah.
You can keep. There's a concept we call arousal non-concordance, which is that people could be aroused because it's a biological thing. So there's stories around a thief came into somebody's house and had intercourse with a woman, and then she was lubricated. And you're like, but why were you? Because it's biological. Yeah. It actually shows that your biological structures, which is your clitoris, is working. If you stimulate it, it has to lubricate the entire system. So it's something that we have to look at. If you think about it in that context, it becomes even more pronounced that the art of doing it and the act in themselves, they need a lot of work. They need some perfection. You need to be able to understand how it works in order for it to work well.
So who's teaching boys about sex?
Today, I think it's the media. Media is teaching them more than anybody else.
And do we need to change that?
Of course, we have to change that.
How do we do that?
Well, maybe.
You know, when I start looking in other directions.
Maybe we use the same media. I mean, when I was little, we used to have a course called Life Skills that used to teach about, teach some concepts of sexual education. Of course, it dared not teach about the experience of intercourse in itself. But today, I mean, if you look at pornography, is largely almost always available.
Okay.
And now there are even, should I say, noble and diplomatic acts of exposure.
Got it.
You know, you're looking at people wearing almost nothing, and so the arousals are there, and the depictions of what sex is, of course, in scripted media like that, makes it difficult. So we've had people feel like, and these are students in high school who are writing about their what they perceive their sexual escapade to be, and it's just rough.
But it's based on what the media has told them.
Because of what they're seeing.
Yeah.
Similarly, we've had people who, based on the same media, and these are both in adults also, they're expecting some big explosion, like when they talk about orgasm, like there should be some
earth-shattering
kind of thing. So in the process, they're not even enjoying the process too.
They're waiting the...
They're only looking
waiting
at... Yes.
Got it. So maybe it's beginning to use those same media channels to reorient.
Not at all. I think that's something that has to be done at the household level.
Agreed.
Because if mom and dad won't tell you, I don't see who else should feel comfortable. I mean, even for me, if a parent should come to me and say, you know, my child is struggling and I want help on this level, what I want to do is to empower the parent to do it themselves. Now, for example, children thrive with experience. If you want to connect with your child, tell them about your experience. Don't give them generic, you know, tell them, oh, I was here too, that kind of thing.
That's what happened to
Exactly.
me.
And when children ask intriguing questions, don't use that as don't use it rather as an opportunity to educate them. Like a child will ask, but why are you pregnant? How did you get pregnant?
Explain it.
It's a period to teach the child about sex education in a way that makes it normal or worthwhile, rather than all over the place. Don't forget that the world is also moving away from the context of sex is being expanded to involve so many things. But this is where your value system and the context in which you want them to see it must be what? Communicated. In other words, the media will do its part, but you have to contextualize. And if you don't do it, then what happens? I've had children come to ask the question of, I want to have sex because he says this or she says this. And they ask me, should I do it? And that's a very difficult question for me to answer. But I keep telling them one thing, that if you have to do it, it must be with the right person, because they have given you a reason to believe that they are worth it, because that's an integral part of yourself that you're giving
away.
And I've been surprised at how they've come back to tell me, I'm not going to do it because I don't think he or she has earned that right just yet. Some people might have just said, but why are you thinking about sex? It's not. It's happening all around us. If you don't talk about it, somebody will. And God forbid that they go to a callous young man or woman. They'll even take advantage of them.
Yes.
So you have to do it yourself.
Got it. So that's one way. What else?
The school system and all the socialization agents like church, school, mosque are all agents that basically will, further drum in the foundation that you have created at home. But the onus still lies on the foundation,
At all.
which is us. And then maybe, like us, we're doing advocating for the media to have more censored kind of things.
Content.
Now, so this will also come back to digital technology usage. And I tell parents every now and then, ensure that you see what's going on
Regulate.
with your child. In fact, first of all, prevent. But when you haven't prevented, it's good that you're in the known so that you can offer some solution. So you go and you realize that the browsing history is showing a lot of, X-rated things. You want to start having a conversation with the child to help them, to teach them or guide them appropriately.
We've often heard about how sex is a spiritual encounter or experience. Is it?
In the terms of oneness, it is a spiritual thing.
In the terms of...
Oneness, like being one with the
You
person.
don't realize it when I'm harassing you.
Oh, yeah, I don't mind. I'll say it for you. Not in the spiritual, religious,
I
not
know
in
what
that
you
sense.
I know
no.
exactly what you
But
mean.
in the
The
terms
coming
of
together.
coming together and feeling in tune with each other, it is spiritual.
Yeah.
Because we do a lot of mindfulness as a spiritual activity. So
Understood.
let me say it in that way.
Understood.
But people do say that when you interact with somebody sexually, a part of you, is sort of you're exchanging parts of yourselves.
Yeah.
And
You don't
sometimes-
believe that?
No, I see. Even from a psychological point of view, the fact that the memories will live on in itself makes it spiritual. I've had people making comparisons of their current partners to their past partners. So it tells you that they have carried a part, and these comparisons can sometimes be hazardous to the relationship.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Does sex alter the way you're thinking?
It does.
How so?
All the time. So you see, biologically, the things that happen before sex, and then during sex, and after sex, normally will alter your thinking. Now, before sex, a lot of people lose control.
Out of control.
Yes. So their
Agency.
ability to process consequences is almost lost.
Just before.
Just before. I mean, once the arousal and the desire phase starts, okay?
Right.
It takes very strong-minded people. Like, we have these conversations we have, and then people will say, yeah, I'm very much afraid of HIV/AIDS. But the other day, before I knew,
You were in.
I was in. And that is that some part is like your prefrontal cortex seems to lose its power to control or regulate during those moments. Now, when you are done also, the release of all these feel-good chemicals tends to make you have a high affinity for the person that you're with, especially in women. In men, especially when they are not in committed relationships, after sex, there's an aura of disgust that seems to circulate. It's like, I just want you to go, because you are not my person.
Okay.
So, interesting fact. Among women, the more climax they have, the more commitment they have.
Have.
In men, on the other hand, commitment is a mental thing.
Okay.
It's not based
On the
sex.
intimate, on the sex.
It's a decision they make and they stick to.
Got it. That's interesting. When you think about women and their view on sex today, and how we've been socialized within our part of the world, I know you've talked about how the mindset shift that needs to happen. But if you had a sister and you were having a conversation with her about sex, right? And you were giving her a tip, what would that tip be? And I ask this because of how should she view sex that's empowering for her?
That sex is an amazing, it's a pleasant experience with the right person at the right time.
Okay.
If you miss any of that, it will cease to have that power.
It's an amazing thing with the right person at the right time. Okay. Interesting. Would you, is there any credence in the conversation around you, how you view sex in terms of not, because a lot of the time there is a thing where women see sex as a tool, right? Is that something we need to start teaching our daughters? What is a lesson?
So I think we need to try and depart from that mindset, because once it's considered a tool, people will also know how to use the tool or how to acquire that particular tool. And then it loses
Its value, its efficacy.
Exactly.
Understood. Understood.
It has an existential value and not an aesthetic one.
I agree with you. I understand.
And that's what I would hope that people can connect or resonate with.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, in having different conversations with different people, what I would have loved to see a lot more is exactly what you've talked about, but most importantly, it's also seeing sex more, not as a transaction, right? But it being something that, like you said, is for pleasure, it's for procreation, it's more meaningful than it being a transactional tool.
In fact, just to add to that,
Please.
the more spontaneous sex is, the better it is.
Okay.
And that spontaneity connotes that there's a connection.
Between the people
And the
involved.
connection just comes.
Yes.
Rather than, so you see, when sex becomes planned, it becomes laborious.
Yes, I agree with you.
And difficult. I remember working with a couple who were trying to have a child. And, the doctor had said, you people have to do it like...
Take your temperature, set an alarm.
Every week. And then one thing that was happening, they were having sex, but he wasn't able to climax because it seemed dutiful in his mind.
Yeah.
And that was really difficult.
Cool.
But the more spontaneous it is, like, you're just walking around the house and then it clicks and it comes. Adrenaline also makes it even more intense.
Okay.
So the kind of sex they say it's like you are hiding to do kind of thing. When you have children and you need to hide to give a quick, those ones are usually more intense.
Yeah.
Also because of the biological side of it, which is the release of adrenaline and noradrenaline. That seems to triple up the feeling that it generates.
Are there any questions that you want to ask and answer? Ask yourself and answer.
Debut.
Are you sure?
I'm learning every day. But one thing I like to say is that you have to work at it. You have to find ways to make it, you have to innovate and make it better every single day. Now, if you're a couple that struggles with the desire, which is that you have a low sex drive or you have challenges with libido, or for men especially with performance, one of the things that you can do, because one of the things that builds intimacy a lot, is engaging in everything except penetration.
Okay.
You're building tension, that's sexual tension, and that tension causes a certain connection. Like practically, when people are away from each other, then they miss themselves more. They build that tension, and when they meet, there are fireworks. Similar thing happens. So when you find that it's become routine and it's laborious and it's not spontaneous, give yourself some time apart. Not apart from that.
Yes, but yeah, from
that. And then, even if you will, do everything but the main act.
Yeah.
Because usually that's the easier part.
Yes.
And it builds the tension of anticipating what it's going to be like.
Right.
It's thrilling on the mind.
Yeah.
And it sets the mood and the tone for it to be a great experience.
Thank you. Cocktails.
Where dear AF
I'm just going to be there and you're going to be shocked.
Nice. Passion fruit. Ah.
Okay, there's passion fruit.
Ah, where there passion fruit? Yes, Anka.
Okay, what else? Apart from passion fruit.
Wait. There's something I know. There's pear.
There's no pear.
Ah.
You started.
We can start
he
again.
started though. No, he started. We can't start. We are continuing.
So there's definitely passion fruit in this.
There's passion fruit. We've already established that.
Mango.
No, it's not mango.
My taste buds are off.
It's because of the fufu. You haven't eaten the fufu yet.
You see, like I always tell you, coffee and perfumes, same thing. You use soup to clear the tongue. So there's passion fruit
Stir it up.
and water.
Thank you, Seth, for coming. I appreciate you. It's got strawberry. It's got a cocktail in it, which has passion fruit. It's got my all-time favorite soda water and ice.
So I now see that the soda water is basically confusing my taste buds.
On that note,
Ah, I see.